Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. In the name of God, most merciful, ever merciful. And may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn wa ala ashab al-Husayn. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The topic for tonight's lecture has to do with dealing with difficulties in our life. If we go back to the Holy Quran, we see that it tells us that our lives are full of struggles and difficulties and problems and tests. In fact, the Holy Quran seems to tell us that the point of our creation in this life is that we go through these difficulties and tests. In one of the verses, the Holy Quran says, "O human being, you are truly going to labor." Labor means to work very hard. You are truly going to labor until you reach your Lord, a great labor. And in another verse, the Holy Quran says, "Do people think that we are simply going to let them be because they have said we believe without testing them?" These verses tell us that tests and tribulations and difficulties are not only part of life, they are perhaps the point of life. And if we go into the narrations, the countless narrations that we have about topics like difficulties and patience, we get the same message, whether from the Holy Prophet or Ahlul Bayt. One narration tells us, for instance, that patience that we need in this life is of three types. One type of patience is the one that we need in order to force ourselves to perform the wajib, the obligatory actions that are incumbent upon us. It's not easy to wake up for the Fajr prayer. You've slept late and the bed is really cozy. It may be cold. You're supposed to open your eyes at that early hour in the morning. It's not easy. It's not easy to fast when you know the day is going to be hot and long and you probably have an exam or you have things to do. These things require patience. They require discipline on your part. That's why the narration tells us that this is a special type of patience and discipline that you need in order to force yourself to go through these struggles, the struggles of performing the obligatory actions. And the point of these obligatory actions is the struggle. People who go to pilgrimage know that. We hear it again and again when we're in the pilgrimage. We're reminded the point is the struggle. The point is not that you do it with ease. It's that you understand that there's a struggle for all of these things you're doing. The second type of patience, the narration tells us, is the type of patience we need to prevent ourselves, to restrain ourselves from performing any acts that are forbidden, any haram. As much as you may want to. As much as you may want to listen to something that's haram. As much as you may want to touch or feel something that's haram. As much as you may want to see something that is haram. There's a special type of patience that you need, a special type of discipline that will restrain you and prevent you from engaging in that action. And then there's a third type of patience that you need, and that one allows you to go through the difficulties and the problems of life. These are the things that we take from the Holy Quran and from the narrations. When we look at patience, even beyond the Holy Quran in our daily lives, everybody agrees that patience is the virtue which you need for any acts of greatness in humanity. If you look at your own life, if you've ever become good at anything, whether you realize it or not, you probably required a lot of patience for it. Whether it's in sports or at school or in any other manner, in any other field, you probably had to have a lot of discipline, a lot of practice, a lot of patience to get to where you are. And this also applies at the grand scale, to build a nation, to create a new school and a new theory, a new school of thought, for instance. You require a lot of patience and a lot of discipline. And if you go in the histories of our prophets and the messengers in the Quran, we see that the Holy Quran insists on this aspect of patience. We have verses in the Quran that tell the Holy Prophet to be patient like the most resolute of the messengers of God, ulil azm, those who are of the highest rank. Their characteristic was patience. And so the Quran tells the Holy Prophet, be patient like them. And when we look at the other verses of the Quran that talk to us as believers, there are also verses like in the end of Surah Al-Imran, which remind us and tell us, be patient, be steadfast, strengthen each other, be wary of God, so that you may be prosperous, so that you may be successful. So if we look at the Holy Quran in general, the general principle is there are difficulties and tribulations and tests in life, and you need patience to go through them. In the story of Musa alayhi salam, with all the struggles that we know that Bani Israel had to face from Fir'aun, in one of the verses the people of Fir'aun were telling him, what are you going to do? Are you going to let Musa ruin and corrupt your society and people are going to stop worshipping you and your gods? So Fir'aun answers, we're going to kill them. We're only going to leave their women behind. And this is when Musa alayhi salam tells his people, this is a lesson for all of us. Despite all these difficulties, Musa alayhi salam tells his people, turn to Allah and be patient. In the Quran, whether we look at the stories of the great nations, whether we look at the stories of the messengers, patience is always a theme. It comes back again and again. This is not the time to expand more on this. There are over 100 verses of the Quran that instruct us about patience. And if we go to the narrations, they're countless. Let's add to this idea of patience, this value of patience, let's add a second one. The one of courage. Courage, again, is something that human beings need if they are to accomplish anything of great success in their lives. Courage allows you to dare. Courage allows you to withstand the challenges that you need to go through in order to reach a successful conclusion. It requires bravery to change yourself, to change others, to change things in the world. And again, we look at the Quran and we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the people who associate with Him to have courage, not fear. For instance, when Musa alayhi salam saw that his cane was becoming a serpent, we're told that he had a bit of fear in his heart. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right away told him, Moses, in my presence, the messengers do not fear. These are lessons for us. Courage and patience are important. If we look at the events of Karbala, we know very well that they were filled of lessons of patience and courage throughout. The entire movement of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was based on the notions of patience and courage. Even before reaching Karbala, the Imam in Medina, when Muawiyah was still alive, he was sending letters to the Imam after Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam passed away. He started threatening the Imam. And the Imam replied to him in letters telling him, and this is the tyrant of his day, the one who had his father killed and his brother killed. And the Imam wrote back to him saying, I swear that I do not know anything better than to fight you. And in another letter he told him, I swear that I do not know of any greater fitna, any greater tribulation on the world of Islam than you rule over it. And then when he died and Yazid took over and he tried to force the Imam very bravely and courageously explained his stance in a very public manner. When he was forced, he said, Yazid is a man who is perverted, and he's a man who is corrupt, he's a man who is addicted to wine, and who disobeys God openly, and a man who kills innocent souls. And someone like me does not pay allegiance to someone like him. So right from the beginning, we see the insistence of the Imam on these notions of bravery and patience and displaying them himself. And then, of course, when we go to the actual events of Karbala, we see that the events take a new height, a new culmination. When Zainab alayhi salam asks from her brother, are you sure that your companions are actually going to stay with you all the way to the end? Are you sure that they're not going to betray you or leave you? As good as they are, when Zainab alayhi salam looks at the other side and she sees that they are in the tens of thousands and the Imam only has a handful of people with him. And the Imam replies to her and he tells her, I swear that I have tested all of them and I have only found bravery and toughness in them, to the point where they are more happy and satisfied and they take more pleasure in dying for my sake than a little newborn when he is suckling on his mother's milk. These are the examples that we have from Karbala about these notions of patience and courage. So, why are we talking about patience and courage? Everybody agrees that these are virtues. Everybody agrees in theory that it is good to have patience and it is good to have courage. We agree on those things. All of this was an introduction. Because the real question is, how come is it that we don't find the patience and the courage and the bravery and the steadfastness that we need in our lives when we need it, for the things that we need it? The question is not whether patience and courage are good. They're inspiring. It's good to keep them in mind. But where does this patience come from? Where does this courage come from? That's the real question we're trying to answer. The reality of anyone who lives in today's societies is that there's actually a crisis going on in society. And anyone who is active in society knows of a theme that is running across. If you work, you will hear about it. If you're in a professional setting, if you're in an academic setting, you're in the universities, you're in the schools, you must have heard about this crisis that is called mental health and mental illness. This did not used to exist before. This has become a new crisis in society. And so when we look around, we see that people are suffering from anxiety, from stress, from all sorts of despair, depression, discouragement. This is all lumped under the general heading of mental illness. In fact, it can reach the point where people completely give up on life and they commit suicide, which is a problem that we never thought would come to our own communities. And now we know in the past couple of years there have been instances of suicides within the Shia community in Ottawa. So we now know that mental illness is something that afflicts us as much as others. It should be completely unacceptable in our communities, people who follow Ahlul Bayt, to give up on life to the point where you commit suicide and you end your life. And if this has already happened, it probably means that there are many others who are thinking and contemplating these problems, these actions. So what do we do about them? We need strength, we need resilience, we need steadfastness and determination and patience to face the problems of our lives. So where do we get that patience? Where do we get that strength? That's the question. The problem, the crisis of the mental illness that we talk about is in reality a much deeper one. And this is a symptom. The reality is that the problem is a crisis of meaning. When people have meaning in their lives, when people have a meaning to the things that they do and they engage in, this gives it value. This allows you to prioritize what you're doing as opposed to something else. This allows you to be patient for that which you are doing. This allows you to sacrifice for that which you are doing, because it has meaning. And if the meaning goes away, then you have no more reason to struggle for something. If we look at our own lives, let's say someone who really cares about the way they look. So if I care about the way I look, I'm probably going to go to the gym. I'm going to be very careful in what I eat. how I sleep and how many hours a day. And when I go to the gym, I'm going to push myself. I'm going to put myself under weights and I'm going to practice and train every day. Not easy. And I'm going to do it day in and day out, hundreds, thousands of days. No problem. Why? Because it has a meaning to me. I'm willing to put myself through that torture and suffering according to other people. They will not do it because it doesn't have the same meaning to them, but it has to me, so I will do it. Someone who cares about their grades at school, maybe because they want to get a prestigious job when they graduate, or they want to make money, or they want to have they care about their competitive at school. While their friends are partying or sleeping, you will find them sitting at home studying away. Why? Because they have given meaning to this part in their life. So they're willing to sacrifice and struggle for it. I think all of us already know that we are willing to do a lot of things for money, for instance. We're willing to work very hard, whether it's bodily or with our mind. We get headaches, we get stressed, we get tired, but we keep going because money is important, not for its own sake, but what it allows us to do. So it has meaning for us. So we're willing to sacrifice and struggle for it. So this tells us that the problem is not that we don't have patience, or that we don't have courage, or that we don't have determination, and we can't get ourselves to do what we need to do. The problem is that we may not be giving the right meaning to the right things in our lives. The meaning is there when we give it, and the struggle comes with it. And when we don't give that meaning, then it becomes very difficult for us to struggle in that manner. For many of my brothers and perhaps sisters sitting and listening, you're still young, and you probably have a very nice, beautiful life right now. And you still don't know what's awaiting you. And I pray to God that it remains that way if it is a beautiful and easy life. But the reality is that life is full of struggle and full of difficulties. With your health, and with your money, and with your loved ones, and at school, and at work, and so on and so forth. And if you live in different parts of the world, you may be dealing with many other problems that we don't have in these beautiful societies like here. You may be having problems of poverty and famine and war. How do you prepare yourself to deal with these situations? How are you going to ensure that when these problems happen, you don't crumble under their weight? And the answer, again, comes from meaning. Where does meaning come from in our life? There is one thing that philosophers and thinkers all agree on about where meaning comes from. Meaning comes from religion. No philosophy, no science can replace the role of religion in giving meaning to your life. The moment you have religion, things start to fall in a certain place. They start having a value. You can actually prioritize. Without that meaning and without that attachment to religion, there's going to be something missing in your life, which will really only show in that moment of struggle. When things are going well, it doesn't really appear to the surface. It's when there's a struggle, when there's tribulation and difficulty, that lack of meaning is going to come to the surface. And either you have meaning, which will allow you to work towards something, or you have no meaning and you have no reason to work towards it. Let's take the example of two people. One of them, someone who does not believe in God. Someone who only believes in materialistic things in life. Their life is going well, they've worked really hard to get the good life they have, and then suddenly, some huge calamity hits. They might get sick, or someone very close to them might get sick. And the sickness is really bad, to the point where they're not even sure how to keep fighting. Now I ask you, why should they keep fighting? If at the end of the day, all that's left from life is this bad quality of life, and then you die and there's nothing after death, why do I keep fighting? What am I fighting for? And if it's someone who's close to me that needs my help, my sacrifice, my time, my energy, my money, at this point where I know that the inevitable is going to happen, what would incentivize me? What would motivate me, push me to sacrifice my time and my energy and my money for this person anymore? What would allow me to deal with this situation with strength? Keep that in mind. Let's go to a second person who has to deal with something similar. The difference is that this person believes in God. They believe that God created this universe. They believe that God created them. They believe that God controls the universe and everything in it. And they believe that sometimes life is not going to go the way you want it to go. And so it may become very difficult. But that God is also all-powerful and all-merciful. And so that person is going to pray to God to help them in their situation. And perhaps God will change the situation. And perhaps God will not. So if God does not change the situation, does that mean that person is going to despair and give up on life? No. That person is going to say, God can see everything and hear everything, and He knows what He's doing, and I believe in an eternal reward that I will get for my struggle in this life. No matter what's happening, God is seeing it, and God is deciding this. He knows best. And so I go in my life with these struggles. It may not be what I would have liked, but I know that God is seeing it, and He's going to reward me eternally for what I'm going through. Are these two people going through the difficulties in the same manner? Are these two people going through the difficulties in a manner that has their heart and their psychology and their mental health? Is it the same? The person who is struggling without the meaning, without this way of interpreting the world, is it the same as the one who has all of this background? Of course not. The person who has this meaning that's coming from religion is not going to be crumbling under the weight of the stress of their life. And that's why in the Holy Quran, we are told in one beautiful verse, the Quran says, talks about those who are good, and it says, those whose hearts come to rest with the remembrance of Allah. And surely it is with the remembrance of Allah that hearts come to rest. When we put it in the context of struggle and tribulation and difficulty, then it takes a completely different meaning for us. We truly understand what this resting heart is. It means that you're at ease, that you're not crumbling under the weight of anxiety and stress in your life, because you have God. You always fall back on God. There's meaning to what you see and what you hear and what you go through in life. So if we go through the life of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, from the beginning to the end, we see that he personified these values of patience and courage throughout his life. And there's no time to talk about his entire life. Let's go directly to Karbala. When the Imam alayhi salam was going through the tragedy of Karbala, the reality is that Karbala from beginning to end is one extreme case requiring patience after another. By any standard, it would have tested any human being, no matter how much patience or courage they would have had. But even by those extreme standards, there were instances in Karbala that took it to another level. And it would have only the heart of an Imam like Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam to handle these things. When the Imam took his young son, the 6-month-old baby, and asked the enemies for some water, and they decided to shoot him with an arrow and kill him in the hands of his father, what did the Imam do at that time? Any human being would have probably crumbled under the situation that just happened. The answer of the Imam has to become our slogan, our philosophy in life. No matter what struggle, what difficulty happens, remember this scene. Go back to this scene when things become difficult. The Imam said, if I am able to endure this calamity, it is because God is seeing it. It is because it is under the watch of God. This is not lost. This is a temporary world and a temporary life. And I know that God is seeing and watching everything. And it has meaning. So it's not lost. I can struggle for this. I can pay a price and pay a sacrifice because it's not lost. There's something in return for this. When we read the Maqtal, we have the same thing. In Maqtal Abi Mukhnaf, we are told the Imam in the last hours, there were so many injuries to his body that he fell to the ground and he stayed there for 3 hours, bleeding and not able to move. And all we have in there to describe that scene are prayers from the Imam and the repetition of the word Sabran ala qada'ika ya Rabb. The Imam is highlighting this idea of patience in all the extreme circumstances that he went through in Karbala. This has to become our slogan in our lives. That's why Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallah Farajah in Ziyarat al-Nahiya al-Muqaddasa, at the end there's a part of it where he's saluting the Imam and he tells him, your patience stunned the angels in the heavens. This is the kind of patience that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam displayed. Followers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam cannot be people who crumble under the face in the face of difficulties in life. The Imam taught us to be courageous, to be full of hope, to look to God, and to know that there's an eternal reward for everything that you're struggling for in life, despite the difficulties. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us understand the value of our religion in our lives. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who suffer the difficulties of our lives with the patience and the courage that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam displayed and taught us. Assalamu ala al-Hussein wa ala Ali ibn al-Hussein wa ala awlad al-Hussein wa ala ashab al-Hussein wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.